Fear foods. What are they? Where do they come from? And how can we get rid of them in our eating disorder recovery journey? Fear foods are any food that elicits extreme guilt, shame, or anxiety, either before we eat the food or while we're thinking about the food, during the time in which we're eating the food, or after the food is consumed. If you are somebody with an eating disorder, you may have noticed that we tend to just lump foods into categories of yes and no. And those no foods are known as our fear foods. However, when we're challenging fear foods, it's very important to distinguish how no is a food. So we want to know which foods are a little bit less scary, more scary, and the most scary. And this is going to be an effective way to distinguish where we are going to begin to challenge which types of foods. Some ways in which we can categorize where the food falls on its level of scariness are either by using a hierarchy number chart or by categorizing these foods into low, medium, and high levels of fear foods. So if we're going to use the categorization system of low, medium, and high, oftentimes people will distinguish these as red foods, so very scary foods, yellow foods, which they elicit somewhat of a scary reaction, and green foods, which basically means that these are safe foods. If you're going to use a number hierarchy chart, we're going to label a list from 1 to 100. 100 is going to have the scariest of the scary foods for us. So for some individuals, these might be foods like mixed foods, casseroles, pizzas, hamburgers, or things that are baked goods, sugars, carbohydrate-rich foods. Really, there's no rules as to which foods fall where on the chart. The main thing is that we are pulling out which foods cause the most anxiety for us and then working our way down the list. So, for example, if we get a very high reaction and have lots of feelings of panic around cake, and then we may want to put that at 100. And we may also get panic from foods like French fries, but it might not be quite as big as cake. So we may put that at an 80. We may also get a reaction of panic from foods like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, but it might not be quite as high as the French fries. So we may put that at, say, a 50, and so on and so forth. These tools are really important as we begin to challenge our fear foods because we don't simply want to start with those very high level foods that are going to produce the most panic possible. That's simply going to potentially derail our recovery process and bring us back a few steps, or it could also cause us to engage in other eating disorder behaviors, which may hinder or delay our recovery journey. So, the best way to challenge these fear foods is to start with medium level fear foods that aren't going to produce the most panic, guilt, and shame, but are also going to challenge that eating disorder and move us one step further in that recovery journey. So, when should we start challenging these fear foods? As early as possible in the recovery journey. So we want to begin these early in the recovery journey because as we are initiating a meal plan, we don't want to be doing this with only safe foods. What this will do is just make it more challenging later on when we've been meeting our meal plan with safe foods and now it's time to incorporate foods that might elicit a response from our eating disorder. So we want to begin early. We want to begin with those lower level fear foods and then work our way up. So when you begin to challenge your fear foods, it's very important to get the support of your meal support team or your healthcare team. These individuals can sit with you as feelings of guilt or shame or depression or panic arise. They can help you sit through the very difficult process of bringing these scary foods back into your meal plan. And this can be very important. Other things that you might try as you are beginning to put fear foods back into your diet are distraction techniques at mealtime. So things like music, talking to a friend or a loved one, or puzzles or television can be really helpful in helping to bring down some of that anxiety as we begin to challenge these fear foods. So when we're ready to challenge the fear foods, how do we do it? There's many techniques, and these will vary depending on where we are at in the recovery journey and also the level of anxiety that the fear food produces. A couple of strategies are exposure therapy. So what this will be is we're going to start bringing the food back into our lives in stages. So for example, the first day that we bring the food back to the table, we might just practice sitting with that food. We are not going to eat it. We're not going to cut it with our fork. We're just going to sit with that food. And this is particularly helpful with those very high levels of fear foods where it's just going to produce a lot of panic and anxiety when we think about that food. So we're just going to sit with it. Next time that food is brought to the table, we might just practice cutting it with our fork. And the next time, we might just practice putting it onto our tongue. The next time, just take in the one bite. And then we'll eventually work ourselves up to the point where we're ready to consume that food in its entirety. Now, like I mentioned, this is best for those very high level fear foods and won't be appropriate for all fear foods as we may be consuming these repeatedly day after day for a week or so. Another really great strategy for challenging fear foods is something that we call food chaining. So the way that we do this is we take a safe food and we manipulate that in stages until we are able to consume a fear food with reduced anxiety. So for example, our safe food might be something like oatmeal. And let's say we're trying to challenge a fear food like a store-bought blueberry muffin. So the way that we might do this is we might take our oatmeal and we might simply add blueberries to the oatmeal. Now, depending on where the blueberries fall on the fear food chart, this may produce a little bit of a challenge for us, challenge a fear food a little bit, but it's not going to be so much that we are going to be flooded with panic as if we just went in and purchased that store-bought blueberry muffin and tried to just go for it. The next stage may include adding a little bit of brown sugar to that oatmeal. So now we've created a combination food, which may be challenging our eating disorder a little bit, but again, not to the full extent of going in and purchasing that store-bought blueberry muffin. The next round, we might do something like create our own homemade oatmeal blueberry muffins. So again, we're not fully challenging that fear food, but moving one step closer. And then that next step might be going into the store and actually purchasing the store-bought blueberry muffin. So these are just a couple of tools to help you challenge the fear foods that are lingering as a part of your eating disorder and move you one step closer to a full and lasting recovery.